In the dense quiet of the Almagro neighborhood in Buenos Aires, the retired Fares Haddad, 74 years old, wakes up suddenly with his chest crushed against the mattress. He cannot move his arms. The air won't pass. His eyes widen. The door bursts open. His daughter walks in, still in pajamas, turning pale when she sees her father suffocating, trapped face down as if his body had locked in place. "Papa, look at me. Why do you sleep like that?" No answer. Only his desperation as he tries to pull in air that doesn't come. The narrative closes with the line that seals the hook. What nearly pushed Fares to collapse that dawn had already been warned about more than 1,000 years ago, and only now has medicine confirmed the real risk. Before continuing, make sure you're subscribed and say in the comments which city you're watching from. Fares has lived in Buenos Aires for more than 40 years. He arrived young, newly married, searching for stability, and since then has become a familiar figure in the streets of Almagro, the man who greets everyone, who helps neighbors carry groceries, who never misses prayer time. Despite this admirable discipline, he keeps a habit that crossed borders and decades, sleeping on his stomach, exactly as he did on warm nights of his childhood in Lebanon. His wife always complained. His children insisted. Even the family doctor suggested adjusting his posture to ease lower back pain. But Fares always replied the same way, with a calm smile. "It's the only way my body relaxes." At night, after Isha, he turned off the light, lay down with his chest pressed to the mattress, and fell asleep quickly, ignoring every guideline. And although he never missed Salat, he never read with attention the advice about rest and health that so many repeated to him. As the months passed, he began noticing small changes, a strange pressure in his chest upon waking, tingling in his arms, difficulty taking a deep breath in the morning. Still, he told himself, just age. The problem is that the body rarely lies, and that dawn it finally demanded its price. The days leading up to the critical night already hinted something was wrong, but Fares didn't realize how every detail pointed to the same issue. That week, every time he woke, he felt a deep ache just below the ribs, as if he had slept with a stone pressed against his chest. When opening and closing his hands, he noticed a slight delay in his fingers, a persistent tingling rising to his wrists. Breathing deeply was harder than before. The air seemed to meet resistance, as if his chest were locked from within. Going up and down the building stairs also changed. Before, he went down easily, holding the railing only out of habit. But that week, each step required more effort, more pauses, more control. Neighbors even commented, "Fares, are you okay? You're walking slowly." He only answered with a tired smile. His daughter, worried, insisted he visit the small local clinic. The on-call doctor examined his lungs carefully, pressed the thoracic area, observed his posture, and asked a simple question. "In what position do you sleep?" Fares replied without hesitation, "On my stomach, since I was a boy." The doctor adjusted his glasses and explained gently, "Your chest is being compressed at night. This position strains the diaphragm, puts pressure on the heart, and limits lung expansion. It's dangerous, especially at your age." Fares didn't argue. He simply nodded politely, as he always did, but inside he downplayed the warning. He thought the doctor might be exaggerating, or his body was exaggerating, or that aging was simply inevitable. That afternoon, when he returned home, he left his coat on the chair, performed wudu calmly, and prayed a siyar on the small blue mat he cherished since his years in Lebanon. He felt spiritually well, and that feeling convinced him he was physically stable. However, while preparing tea, his eyes fell on the book of hadiths he had left open the night before. The page showed exactly the advice many had already mentioned to him, but he had never taken seriously. The warning against sleeping on the stomach. He ran his fingers over the text, reflected for a moment, and murmured, "It can't be that serious." He closed the book, set it aside, and right there, in that simple gesture, he ignored the greatest warning he would receive before the collapse. The night fell heavy over Buenos Aires. The air was still, the silence absolute, and only the faint hum of the fan filled the room. Fares, restless since lying down, turned onto his chest, his preferred position since adolescence. But this time, something different happened. The moment he placed his weight on his torso, an internal snap echoed like a lock. A sudden pressure formed in the center of his chest, so intense it seemed to push the air out of his lungs. He tried to inhale, but nothing moved. It was as if he were trapped inside his own body. His heart raced. A tingling spread across his neck, slowly rising to his face. His awareness was overtaken by a fear so deep he even tried to say his daughter's name, but not even a whisper came out. His throat was rigid, blocked by the position that crushed him. His eyes began to burn. Tears ran silently as he struggled to turn, but his arms seemed not to obey. Every second trapped in that posture felt like sinking into quicksand. The dim light of the bedside lamp cast shifting shadows on the walls, and the clock showed 3:27, as if frozen in that endless minute. Then, in the hallway, his daughter awoke to a muffled sound, a short noise, something between a groan and a thump against the mattress. Frightened, she got up and ran to her father's room. When she opened the door, the scene stole her breath. Fairs was completely still, face down, his hands trying to reach the edge of the bed. His shoulders trembled with useless effort. The skin on his face was reddened, starved of oxygen. "Papa! Papa, listen to me!" she shouted, her voice cracking. She rushed forward, tried to lift his torso, but his body was rigid, as if fighting against an invisible weight. With every attempt to breathe, he made the slightest movement almost imperceptible. Panic overtook her. Her chest rose and fell in quick waves, her trembling hands trying to support her father without hurting him even more. "Please turn slowly," she begged, unsure if he could hear. When she finally managed to tilt his face slightly to the side, Fairs gasped a faint breath, the first sign he was still conscious. The shock would not be forgotten any time soon, and in that instant, a thought crossed her mind. This should never have happened. The story was only beginning. The daughter tries to adjust Ferris's torso, but each movement reveals something worse than she imagined. As soon as she turns him slightly, his face takes on a purplish tone, deep and almost metallic. His lips tremble, and small spasms run along his jaw, as if his body were locking from within. His chest rises only slightly, almost unnoticeable, a short lift, followed by long seconds of stillness. It is like watching a flame about to die. She places her hand over his ribs and realizes the air is not circulating. There is no expansion, no strength, only a failed attempt to inhale. "Papa, talk to me, please," she pleads, her voice trembling. He opens his eyes for a moment and tries to say something. The sound comes out trapped, rasping, as if a weight were pressing inside his chest. With an effort that seems to drain the little air he has left, he whispers, "No, air comes in." The short phrase is enough to throw her into absolute despair. Her heart races, her hands lose stability for a few seconds. She looks around, searching for anything that makes sense, an explanation, a solution, anything. But the room is quiet, too quiet. The fan keeps turning, but the noise that always filled the space now feels distant, muffled, as if the entire world had lowered its volume. His breathing falters in irregular intervals, one short cycle, then a void, another weak exhale, then more silence. She holds her father's hand and feels his pulse accelerate in a frightening rhythm, beating far too fast, only to then lose strength and sink into a fragile, almost dissolved pattern. "Papa, hold on, I'm here, hold on," she says, trying not to cry. Sweat drips down his forehead. The cold skin contrasts with the heat of the body trapped in the wrong position. It is a silent, cruel collapse that strikes without warning, and she cannot understand. There is no trauma, no blow, no sudden illness. How could a sleeping position trigger something so severe? The clock keeps moving, but time feels frozen. The room grows darker, the air heavy, almost oppressive, as if the atmosphere itself were registering the gravity of the moment. The distant sound of ambulances echoes through the window, creating a strange contrast with the silence inside the house. The daughter presses her ear to his chest, trying to listen more clearly. His heartbeat jumps in small bursts, oscillating between irregular spikes and sudden drops. Each failure seems to announce something worse still approaching. She tries lifting his torso again, but Fairs feels a sharp sting and releases a faint, almost inaudible moan. His eyes close. She touches his face, terrified. "Papa, look at me. Don't sleep. Don't sleep now." But Fairs does not respond. The atmosphere in the room changes completely. There is something heavy in the air, a tension that cannot be explained by physiology alone. It is as if the environment were waiting for the next movement, the next revelation, the next step that will decide the outcome of that dawn. And she realizes, with an involuntary shiver, that this is not just a scare, it is a warning. The ambulance arrives quickly, and within minutes, Fairs is rushed to Hospital Argerich. The daughter accompanies the entire trip, holding his hand, watching the constant fluctuation of the oximeter, which keeps dropping and rising again in an unstable pattern, as if each breath were an individual battle. In the main hallway, Doctors and nurses transfer him to an emergency evaluation room. The team works with precision: electrocardiogram, arterial blood gas tests, lung auscultation, oxygen through a mask. Each procedure reveals more than expected. When the first report appears on the screen, the resident's expression changes. He calls the on-duty cardiologist, who studies the numbers carefully. The diagnosis begins to take shape. The daughter asks, her voice low, "What is happening to him?" The cardiologist takes a deep breath before answering, as someone who knows the explanation will be surprising. "There is a significant decrease in lung expansion. Your father is not able to inflate his chest the way he should." The heart monitor emits a rhythmic beep, marking the irregularity between one respiratory cycle and the next. The specialist continues, pointing at the chart. This prolonged posture compresses the sternum, strains the ribs, and prevents the lungs from doing their job. "Look here. There is partial obstruction of airflow. He spent too much time with the weight of his body on the thoracic cavity." The daughter widens her eyes, trying to absorb it. "But he was just sleeping." The doctor nods, but with gravity. "Sleeping on the stomach can be especially dangerous for elderly people. The body loses the ability to compensate. There are also clear signs of nighttime hypoventilation. He spent hours receiving less oxygen than he needed." A second specialist comes in, this time from pulmonology. He quickly reviews the results and confirms, "There are signs of prolonged respiratory effort. This usually happens when the body tries to pull in air against a physical blockage." The daughter tries to understand, "But how did this happen so fast?" The pulmonologist explains, "It wasn't fast. It was building up. The prone position puts pressure on the heart, reduces blood flow in the lungs, and can lead to suffocation episodes during sleep." The words fill the room like a diagnosis that blends science and surprise. The monitors continue recording small variations in heart rhythm. The nurse adjusts the oxygen flow and says softly, "He will stabilize, but he needs to change habits." Meanwhile, Fares slowly regains consciousness. His gaze is still tired but alert. He watches the doctors talking and, in silence, recalls something distant. An old phrase mentioned countless times in his childhood, repeated by grandparents, uncles, and even teachers at the mosque. "Do not sleep on your stomach, for it is a posture that does not please and harms the body." A piece of advice he always treated as a small detail, something without practical relevance. Now Argentine medicine was explaining exactly what that recommendation was meant to prevent: cardiac compression, respiratory failure, reduced oxygen, risk of arrhythmias. The cardiologist leans in to speak directly to him. "Mr. Fares, we need you to control your sleeping position very strictly. This posture can cause new episodes, and depending on your age, the body cannot always react in time." He tries to speak, still weak. "I just slept, like always." The doctor places a hand on his shoulder, firm and empathetic. "That's exactly the problem. Sometimes the things we do out of habit are the ones that harm us the most. You were lucky to be found in time." The daughter holds her father's hand, emotional and frightened, while the monitors finally begin to stabilize. A reflective silence settles over the room. Fares closes his eyes for a moment, and he doesn't think about the scare nor the pain. He thinks only about the wisdom he ignored for decades, and in that moment, he understands that modern medicine was only describing, with charts and studies, what had been warned long before. Science had finally caught up with the revelation. The return home happens in the late afternoon, with the Buenos Aires sky tinged in orange tones that pass through the taxi windows. Fares remains silent throughout the ride. The daughter watches his face reflected in the glass, a mixture of fatigue, regret, and something even deeper, the feeling of having ignored an ancient warning that now demanded attention. When they enter the apartment, he leans on the doorframe for a few seconds before slowly walking to the bedroom. The room looks exactly as it did in the morning. The bed still unmade, the pillow crooked, the marked page of the Hadith book resting on the nightstand. Fares sits on the edge of the bed and takes a deep breath. His daughter asks, "Do you want me to bring you some water, Papa?" He only shakes his head. The distant sound of cars and footsteps in the hallway helps fill the silence settling in. With trembling fingers, he picks up the book and opens it again to the passage he had ignored so many times. His eyes follow each line with almost ceremonial slowness until he reaches the phrase he always considered too small to matter: "Avoid sleeping on the stomach." He closes the book slowly, resting it on his lap. His gaze remains fixed on the floor, as if reviewing his entire life in small fragments. The nights of his youth in Beirut, sleeping on a simple mattress. The years of hard work in Argentina, the belief that nothing could shake him. Now after the scare, he understands it was not just ordinary advice. A stubborn tear slips from the corner of his eye. He tries to wipe it discreetly, but his daughter notices and approaches, touching his shoulder. "Papa, this isn't your fault," he answers with a trembling voice. "I read this so many times, I heard this so many times, and still I ignored it." The emotional weight of the confession hangs in the air. At that moment, someone knocks on the door. It is the Lebanese neighbor, Samir, who heard what happened and came upstairs to check on him. He walks in with a concerned smile and asks, "How are you, Fairs?" The elderly man lifts the book and says, "It's all here. It has always been here, but I never paid attention." Samir sits beside him and speaks calmly, as someone offering a necessary truth. These teachings are not only spiritual, they also protect the body. They are warnings that safeguard us even before we understand why. Fairs lowers his head, absorbing every word. A gentle breeze enters through the open window, moving the curtain. The room seems brighter than before, as if the place itself were part of the revelation. Samir continues, "When the messenger advised against sleeping like that, it wasn't superstition, it was care. Care for breathing, for the heart, for the pressure on the chest." The daughter watches the two men speaking and notices one detail. For the first time in years, her father is not trying to argue, not trying to minimize, not saying, "I've always slept like this and I'm fine." Something has changed. Fairs closes the book gently, resting his hands on the cover. He watches his own breathing, which now flows more freely thanks to the treatment. Slowly, he says, "I almost lost everything because of a habit. And that habit had been warned about long before I was even born." Samir agrees with a firm nod. The revelation didn't come to contradict the body, but to show paths that science would only discover much later. The daughter holds her father's hand and concludes, maybe this scare was a reminder, a call to change. Fairs lets out a long breath, almost as if releasing years of accumulated stubbornness. He looks again at the marked page, but now with a different feeling, not guilt but understanding. The moment is silent, simple, but transformative. It is there, in that ordinary bedroom in Buenos Aires, that something finally aligns inside him, the certainty that the wisdom he dismissed his whole life had been trying to protect him all along. And now, for the first time, he is ready to listen. The next afternoon arrives with a cloudy sky and the smell of rain in the streets of Buenos Aires. Inside the apartment, the atmosphere changes as well. After the conversation with Samir and the reading that opened his eyes, Fairs feels something moving inside him. But moving the body is something else entirely. Understanding is easy. Transforming is hard. When night falls, the daughter prepares the bedroom with almost ritual-like care. She places 2 firm pillows beside her father and another behind his back, creating a kind of soft but steady barrier. The goal is clear: keep him from sleeping on his stomach again. Fairs watches everything with a mix of gratitude and discomfort. "Do I really need all of this?" he asks, trying to sound humorous. She answers without hesitation, "Papa, you've slept like that since you were a boy. You're not going to change overnight." He sighs, already imagining the difficulty. The mattress feels different, the sheet feels rougher, and no position feels familiar. When he finally turns off the lights, the quiet in the room becomes a reminder that the challenge now belongs only to him, and to the strength of his own habit. The first night is long, very long. Fairs turns to one side, then the other, adjusts the pillow, feels the anxiety rising. His body, accustomed to decades of repetition, begs for the old posture. He tries to resist, then tries to negotiate with himself, closes his eyes, opens them again. His breathing becomes restless. Almost at his limit, he whispers, "Just 5 minutes and just to relax." But he remembers the suffocation, the locked chest, the doctor explaining the risk. He also remembers the phrase he read in the book, the weak voice that was almost lost that dawn, and he repeats to himself softly to strengthen his own resolve, "I learned the lesson." The night moves on. Around 3 in the morning, his body wins for a moment and tries to turn. The side pillow blocks the movement. Fairs wakes up startled, irritated, as if he had been jolted inside his own dream. He sits up in bed, rubs his face, and breathes deeply. Everything inside him seems to fight against the change. 60 years, he murmurs. How do you break 60 years? He gets up, walks around the room, drinks a little water, and lies down again. This time he adjusts the pillows himself, as if he were slowly taking command of his own process. The next night the struggle continues, But something subtle changes. He wakes up fewer times, complains less, tries harder. The daughter watches from a distance, interfering far less than before. The change needs to come from him, not from pillows. A week passes. Fairs feels his body resisting the new posture, but not as fiercely as before. His chest feels lighter upon waking, his breathing steadier. The morning drowsiness reduced. Even so, the temptations persist. On some nights, his body tries to return to the old position, the way someone runs back to a comforting addiction. And every time it happens, Fairs wakes up and says the same phrase, always with the same determined tone, "I'm not going back. Not after what I saw." The test isn't only physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual. It's about discipline, about respecting limits, about recognizing that small actions can save lives. Samir stops by to visit him during the week and asks, "How are the nights?" A timid smile appears on Fairs' face. "Harder than I thought, but I'm winning." The neighbor places a hand on his shoulder and replies, "Every deep change starts with a silent struggle." And Fairs knows it's true. Each night becomes a battle between habit and awareness, between past and wisdom, between the old pattern and the new understanding. And despite the effort, he feels something growing inside him, the sense that he is regaining control of his own health. The old man from Buenos Aires discovers that breaking a habit is not punishment. It is freedom, and that freedom is starting to bear fruit. The week advances quietly, marked by small victories and discreet setbacks. The apartment in Almagro keeps its usual rhythm, cars passing on the street, neighbors chatting in the hallway, the old radio in the living room playing tangos in the morning. But inside Fairs' bedroom, a silent revolution continues, night after night. And then the decisive dawn arrives. The house is completely dark. Only a sliver of orange light from the street lamps on Avenida Rivadavia slips through the curtains. The clock shows 3:12 when something different happens. Without realizing it, Fairs' body begins to perform the old reflex, slowly shifting toward the prone position. First, the hip turns a centimeter, then the right shoulder, finally the neck. The movement is almost automatic, like a deeply rooted habit, trying to reclaim its territory. But the exact second his chest starts to tilt, he wakes up. His eyes open abruptly, as if pulled from a well. There is a moment of confusion, then the sharp awareness of what is about to happen. His breathing quickens. His heart beats hard. He feels that old current of habit trying to drag him back. But this time something changes. There is no despair. There is no panic. There is choice. Fairs inhales deeply, holds the air for a brief moment, and with deliberate calm moves himself back to his side. The gesture is not automatic. It is conscious, steady, as if he were taking possession of his own body for the first time in decades. He whispers to himself, in a low tone but full of resolve, "I'm not going back." The side posture feels strange again, but it doesn't matter. He adjusts the pillow, places his hand on his chest, and feels his lungs expand freely. His breathing flows. The air passes without resistance. It is as if his body finally recognizes that the struggle is ending. For the rest of the night, he sleeps deeply, without interrupting the cycle, without suffocating, without turning. There are no pillows blocking him, no external support. For the first time, he remains in the new position out of pure will, not restraint. When dawn arrives, Fairs opens his eyes even before the alarm rings. A soft light fills the room. He sits up slowly and notices something he had not felt in a long time. Lightness. There is no pressure on his chest, no shortness of breath. His head does not hurt. His shoulders feel loose, as if they had truly rested. He places his feet on the floor naturally, without the discomfort that used to follow him. He stands up, walks to the kitchen, and notices that even the rhythm of his breathing has changed. It is steadier, deeper, more alive. His daughter, still sleepy, appears at the door. "Papa, did you sleep well?" Fairs smiles. A different smile, full of relief, like someone who has crossed a bridge he wasn't sure he could make it across. "Sleep? No. I was reborn." She steps closer, emotional, and replies, "I knew you could do it." He touches his chest with an open hand, breathes deeply again, and says, "Now I understand what I ignored." The body speaks, and the ancient warnings were never an exaggeration. The transformation finally happens. Not in an office, not in an emergency room, but in an intimate choice, in a silent night where Fairs, alone, defeated a 60-year habit. The news about Fairs' critical night didn't take long to spread through the neighborhood. The next morning, during breakfast at the corner bakery, two neighbors whispered, "Did you hear about the man on the 6th floor? He almost couldn't breathe." It was from sleeping on his stomach, as imagine that. The words traveled quickly. Within hours, residents from other buildings began asking, curious, how something so simple could trigger such a crisis. Fairs' daughter, still shaken, explained the situation to those who asked, and soon the story took on proportions no one expected. The doctor from the local health clinic, when questioned, confirmed, "Yes, that position compresses the chest. In elderly people, the risk is even greater." That statement fell like a spark on dry straw. Suddenly, the subject stopped being just a domestic scare and became a topic of conversation in markets, beauty salons, taxis, and around alfajor tables on Avenida Corrientes. The Arab community, always united, reacted first. At the small mosque in Almagro, the imam suggested gathering the attendees after Maghrib to talk about caring for the body. He said, "Revelation does not speak only to the spirit, it speaks to the physical as well. Ignoring that is ignoring half of wisdom." The message touched everyone present. Many remembered hearing, when they were younger, recommendations against sleeping on the stomach, but they had never understood the reason. Now, with Fares's episode, everything took on new meaning. Islamic centers in other neighborhoods, Balvanera, Flores, Constitucion, decided to join the movement. Within days, they organized meetings dedicated to topics such as respiratory mechanics, safe resting positions, silent risks for the elderly, the relationship between posture and circulation, how revelation and medicine converge. The gatherings were simple but full of meaning. Families arrived with notebooks in hand. Newly reverted youth sat in the front row, eager to understand the connection between health and spirituality. Elderly men exchanged experiences, and often discreet tears. Even Argentine doctors, some with no connection to the religion, began attending the meetings to explain how incorrect posture can reduce lung capacity, hinder oxygen exchange, and strain the heart. One of them said, "Often we treat symptoms that could be avoided with simple changes." The statement resonated among everyone present, and Fairs' story became a starting point for profound reflection. It was no longer just a scare in the middle of the night. It became a living reminder that the body requires care, discipline, and humility. It also became a powerful example of how ancient teachings speak directly to modern discoveries. A young Lebanese man from the neighborhood, emotional, commented at the end of a lecture, "Sometimes we think we know more than our ancestors, but one scare is enough to realize we know almost nothing." Fairs' daughter, watching from a distance, smiled with gratitude. She never imagined that the terror of that dawn would spark a collective change, and Buenos Aires, a city full of voices, rhythms, and cultures, paused to listen, perhaps for the first time, to what had been said for centuries, but rarely understood. The following days brought a quiet yet profound change to Fairs' routine. The dawn that nearly stole his breath opened room for new habits, and he decided to turn each night into a small ritual of protection. At the end of the day, when the streetlights begin reflecting off the buildings in Almagro, he prepares a cup of chamomile tea. The warm aroma fills the narrow kitchen, bringing a calm he never consciously sought before. Then he turns off his phone, closes the curtains, and walks slowly to the bedroom where the mattress now has 2 pillows meticulously placed on the sides, gentle barriers to keep his body from returning to the old habit. He lies on his side, breathes slowly, feels his ribs expand freely, and whispers a brief prayer, grateful for still being alive. The room remains silent, and for the first time in a long while, the feeling accompanying sleep is one of safety, not danger. The mornings change as well. Before, he woke with pressure in his chest, a sense of suffocation and neck pain. Now he opens his eyes lightly, as if the air had entered before he fully woke. He gets up firmly, puts on his jacket, and walks to Almagro Square, where he always greets the same group of elderly men who play dominoes under the trees. One of them comments, "Fairs, you have a different energy. What changed?" He smiles, adjusts the scarf around his neck, and answers calmly, "It started when I decided to respect what had already been said a long time ago." The phrase sparks curiosity. Soon other neighbors gather around him to ask for details, how he managed to abandon a decades-old habit, what he felt that night, how he recognized the signs from his body, and he explains everything patiently, from the diagnosis at the hospital to the first night he managed to maintain the correct posture effortlessly. Younger neighbors, especially those who study late or work night shifts, begin listening to his advice. Some ask for guidance about pillows, breathing, safe positions. Others share their own struggles with sleep habits. His story becomes a trigger for community awareness. Even local shopkeepers, who always saw him walking slowly and uncomfortably, notice the change. The owner of the grocery store comments, "You look younger, Fares." He only smiles again, not out of vanity but gratitude. It is as if he had regained something simple yet precious, control over his own body. With time, Fares begins to be seen as a small beacon in the neighborhood, someone who proves that ancient wisdom and modern science do not compete, but walk side by side. A living example that listening to advice can literally save lives. And the new routine is not a burden. It is light, steady, almost natural. He embraces it with discipline, and even more with conviction, because now he knows the price of negligence. And more importantly, he knows the value of change. The days pass, and Buenos Aires awakens with the cold wind running through its old streets. Fares, now more aware of his own body, walks slowly to the balcony. The neighborhood is still quiet. Distant cars, hurried footsteps, the sound of a kettle boiling. Everything forms a calm rhythm he had forgotten to notice. He rests his hands on the railing and lifts his face. The sky is overcast, heavy, but a beautiful shade of gray, the kind that announces unhurried rain. There is something in that scene that matches his new life. Simplicity, balance, harmony between what he feels and what he finally understands. He breathes deeply and notices how easily the air enters, without the old tightness in his chest. For the first time in many years, he feels that body and spirit are moving in the same direction. There is no conflict, no resistance, only peace. Beside him, his daughter watches in silence. She realizes that the man in front of her is not just the father who survived a scare. He is someone transformed from within, someone who found meaning in something that was always within reach, but that he had never valued. With a calm voice, Fares breaks the silence. "The guidance came before the science. I was just slow to listen." His daughter smiles, and in that brief moment, the entire house seems to breathe with him, in relief, in gratitude, in learning. The narrator concludes softly without breaking the tone. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and watch the next video. Because some advice never ages, it only waits for the right moment to be understood.